Sorry, I'm trying to figure out how to use this software on Windows as well. All at the same time. We're going to get through this. Okay, so yesterday we we talked about navigation charts. Just kind of give you an introduction to the navigational charts. Did everybody get a chance to watch the videos that I had on the site, on the Google Drive?
Yeah.
So, just the same as always, are there any questions about anything that you watched on the videos last night? Did you guys feel like they covered those charts pretty thoroughly and helped you understand what you're looking at? Or is there, tonight we're going to talk about the actual navigational aids and their function, but as far as being able to look at a map and have a decent understanding as to what you're looking at, did everybody feel like that accomplished that goal? Come on, y'all, I need some participation.
Yeah.
I tend to learn better
I think I got the basics down.
Okay. What were you saying, Emily?
I tend to learn better by doing.
Mm-hmm. And there will be a lot of doing during our flight planning, but let's see. Okay. Well, let's start talking about the actual navigational aids, the different types of navigation that we use, and how pilots use them. Remember, some of this information is more directed towards just accomplishing the requirements of the course, the FAA requirements, but as usual, we're going to really identify the things that apply to us dispatchers in a practical sense. So, we're just, a lot of the instrumentation that we're going to cover, we're just going to kind of look at it and just give you a real general, this is what it does. But some of the instrumentation or the different types of navigation we'll actually dive into a little bit. So the outline for this PowerPoint and for this class today, we're going to talk about the traditional navigation systems, or also known as the ground-based navigation systems. NDBs, VORs, DMEs, RNAVs. And then we're going to talk about advanced navigation systems, mainly GPS, WAS, LOS, INS. So, yeah. Then we'll talk about the flight support systems. So, what instrumentation is actually helping the pilots interpret the data that they're given, and what helps the pilots navigate while they're on these jet routes and high altitude routes and stuff like that. So And we'll talk briefly about the instrument approach system and different safety systems that are on board the aircraft. So these traditional navigation systems, we kind of talked about how the first navigation systems back in the 1920s, 1910s, 1920s, aviation, when it was born, initially started out, it was kind of a rich man's hobby. And back then, it wasn't really a hobby. It was, very, very dangerous. They were still learning, and there was a very, very steep learning curve. But they, like we said before, they started out even with just fires from hilltop to hilltop. They would just light fires, and they'd actually have a person living on these hilltops, and that's how they would navigate at first. Then they got the arrows that are cemented into the ground that we talked about, with the rotating light to help pilots identify those arrows in the ground. And then we started getting different instrumentation system. We got like the NDBs and things of that nature that actually broadcast a radio signal. And things have just progressed and gotten more accurate, better, and we are continually improving these systems. But when we talk about these traditional or ground-based navigational aids, the first one that we'll talk about is this non-directional beacon. Non-directional beacons, like I said before, it's a ground-based radio transmitter. It's simply just sending out a 360-degree signal that just tells the pilots, this is where I'm at. Find your way to me, basically. It transmits on the L and M bands. So those frequencies would be 190 to 535 kilohertz. That means that the signal travels low to the ground, and the lower the signal, the better penetration you have of obstacles. So buildings and stuff like that don't really interfere very well with NDBs. You can actually pick up NDBs from very long distances. Think of it as like an AM radio, AM radio wave. You've got the FM stations that transmit at a much more clear and crisp signal. The quality is a lot better of the signal. But if you notice on days when you're driving in mountains, or let's even say that there's, weather, your signal actually gets worse, and you get the fuzzy static, and it doesn't transmit very well through those obstacles. But AM radio, no matter where you're at, you can always pick up AM radio stations, and they're not as clear or crisp, but they still will transmit through obstacles. You can pick up AM radio stations driving through canyons. You can pick them up in the middle of nowhere. Bad weather days, it just doesn't matter. That signal travels very well, and it's because it's a lower radio frequency, so it doesn't want to just try to blast its way through obstacles. It just kind of, how do you say, it just bounces off of things really, really well. So when we talk about the ionosphere, we'll get a little bit more into the different types of atmosphere when we get into meteorology, but ionosphere is just a low level type of atmosphere. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, so the voice transmissions, when it talks about AWOS, it's transmitting automated weather observations. AWOS is transmitted on these same bands, so the pilots can actually pick up weather in the same way. So these NDBs, the instrumentation that the pilot uses inside the aircraft is known as an automatic directional finder, or as we love our acronyms, an ADF. It has basically the components that make up the system is, of course, antennas on the outside of the aircraft. And then you have a receiver, a box inside the airplane where the pilots can tune in. You can see the receiver down here in the bottom right-hand corner. Let's see how this pointer does. Hey, can you guys see that pointer really well? Does that help outline? I'll take that as a yes.
Are you talking about the red dot?
Yeah, so just to help you guys track what I'm trying to point out. Yeah, so that's the receiver. As you can see, the pilot can turn this knob right here. They can turn that knob, tune in the frequency of the NDB, and then they can use this indicator to help them navigate to and from the station. So, as we said before, NDBs are becoming less and less. They're phasing them out. They're just antiquated old dinosaur equipment. So really the only times you see these ADFs, these automatic directional finders, is in smaller private aircraft. So you won't really see those in our modern jets. So radiomagnetic indicators. So this is just using both an NDB and a VOR. It'll pick up a VOR and an NDB to give you more accurate indication of where you are relative to the different stations. Just kind of helps us pinpoint more accurately where we are in the sky. But once again, this isn't found in our modern jets anymore, really at all. Typically, we only see these in the high performance aircraft. So we're talking about, like, whether it's a military aircraft or these aerobatic aircraft, stuff like that. It's just not something that we really use anymore. The difference between, like, the ADF and the VOR is this compass card will actually rotate. They can tune in the heading and rotate that compass card, and then the needles will adjust to the radial signals. So that using ADF navigation or NDB navigation, so the indicators point directly to the station. So no matter where you're at, it's just going to point directly to where the station is. Think of it as a compass, but a compass that can change location, where north isn't always north. Think of it as just it, like I said before, it just allows a pilot to navigate directly to a station. So you can see here they've got these little aircraft in the center here. So if the needle is pointed on this side, so as you can see here, the nose of the aircraft would be a 2 indication. If it's behind, like say it were down here on the, it was down here on this 1-2, then it would be a from indication. And when we talk about this fixed position, so if it's a fixed card, then it is the radial bearing. And if it has a movable compass, like we talked about in the previous, then that's the magnetic bearing. And to determine our position, we use magnetic heading plus radial bearing equals our magnetic bearing. So a bunch of gibberish that you don't need to understand, but...
Can I give a little insight into that?
Yeah.
Just in my brief hours of experience, we used to use the VORs with this equipment. We would set the radio to the signal, and you have a 2 indicator. And as you fly toward that, as soon as you get over the top of it, you see the 2 indicator flips over, and as you pass the VOR, then the 2 becomes a from, and you're flying from that VOR on that radio. Just to give you a little bit more detail into what Garrett was talking about.
Yeah, so that's on a VOR. With the NDB, it's even more basic than a VOR. So the NDB doesn't even give us a to from indication. It doesn't even give us a radial from the station. It just simply points to the station. The next thing that we talk about is the VOR, and this is where the instrumentation, let's see if we've got a picture here coming up. Yeah, so here is what you're talking about, the to and from indicators. This needle doesn't just point towards the station, it identifies the radial that we are on. So we'll get to that in just a second, but yeah, it's similar to a VOR, but the VOR gives us a lot more information than what an ADF or an NDB even gives us. So this is like, believe it or not, Rex, this is something that was probably even before you were flying, something that was common before you were even flying. So
just how old do you think?
Well, I think you were probably flying in the 90s.
Yes.
But ADFs, and NDBs are navigational equipment that was typically used back in the 40s, 30s, 40s, 50s. I can't remember the exact year, but VORs were being used in I believe they came out were introduced in the late 50s, early 60s. So, yeah, like I said, this is really antiquated equipment. VOR navigation is so cheap to put into aircraft now. I mean, ADF is really, really old and antiquated, but VOR is cheap enough now to the point where, and it gives you so much more information that nobody puts ADF into their aircraft anymore, just because of like the lack of information it provides and the cost of the equipment still. So it's just old stuff. It's like using an 8-track now. So now VORs. As we said before, VOR stands for very high frequency omnidirectional range. So, we talked about how this VOR is a station. This is actually what they look like. You can see these all over the place as you're driving on Southern Parkway towards the airport. If you look out towards the airport to the north of the highway there, you can see the VOR for St. George, the St. George VOR. You can also see these like in the Valley of Fire, on your way to Vegas.
Mormon Mesa.
Yeah, Mormon Mesa, you can see that one. Bryce Canyon. You can see the actual ground stations pretty much everywhere. Just got to be looking for them. But like we said before, it's just sending out this 360-degree signal, and each one of these radials, as we call them, they're accurate within 1 degree. So pretty accurate system. As it says here, it's the primary navigation aid used by civil aviation. So pretty much every aircraft in the sky is going to have a VOR radio in it, receiver in it, and the appropriate instrumentation. So like it says here, the ground station is oriented to magnetic north. So let's talk about magnetic north really quick. I don't know how to do it on this computer. Let's see if I can do this. So as I kind of indicated last time, we were talking about magnetic north. Magnetic north is relative to where you are in the world, really. I'll make this gigantic. Okay. So can everybody see? Well, that's pretty blurry. Yeah, better picture. That's a better picture. Okay, that's excellent. Okay. So, as you can see, magnetic north doesn't necessarily point to the North Pole. The magnetic north is pointing to somewhere up here over central United States. You can see this 0 degree line. What it's pointing to is there's actually like a huge iron deposit up here somewhere in northern Canada, and that's basically where magnetic north is. As we deviate from this line, just like when we talked about time, universal time code, the further we get away from this line, the greater the magnetic north becomes. So the greater the deviation from magnetic north. We call it declination. So as you can see here over like Houston, Texas, Dallas, Texas, that's 5 degrees. So we'd have to correct our heading by 5 degrees. And there's a saying in aviation, when we move from the 0 line to the east, we subtract. When we move from this 0 line to the west, we add onto it. So let's say that we wanted to fly 360 degrees in southern Utah. We can see 10, 11, 12 degrees. We're about 12 degrees in St. George. We're about 12 degrees off of magnetic north. So we would have to add 12 degrees to our 360 degree heading in order to actually fly 360 degrees. Does that make sense? So we would actually fly a course, what we would see on the magnet, on the compass in our aircraft, we would see 12 degrees, and that would be flying true north. So true north is, just as you would imagine, the actual North Pole in the Arctic. Magnetic north is what we're going to fly in aviation. And like I said before, we'll get true north. There's another thing that we kind of talk about when it comes to weather reports or wind reports. You'll get a wind report and it'll say the winds are coming from 220 at 10 knots. When it is in text form, when you're reading it off of a wind report, that is in true north. If it's verbal, like you tune into a radio station, one of those automated weather observation systems, the AWOS, and it's being transmitted over a radio frequency, that verbal reading of the winds are in magnetic north. So it is corrected for our deviation from true north. Is everybody confused?
I'm doing okay. Luckily, with my military background, I've had to declinate a compass many times to do land nav and things like that, but those who haven't might be confused.
Yeah. And this is something that we're going to practice lots and lots in our flight planning. So if you're feeling a little overwhelmed, I promise it'll get better. All of my classes, all of Adam's classes always feel overwhelmed and feel like they're in over their head when we go through stuff like this, but I promise you.
Could you explain where we would use this in dispatch?
Yeah, so the only time we're going to worry about this in dispatch is when we're manually flight planning, really.
Like a manual manifest, or when we're having to test?
When you're having to test. So
Okay.
for the dispatch practical, for the dispatch practical, that's pretty much the only time that you'll actually have to worry about true north and magnetic north. I mean, the other time that you'd ever have to worry about it, and these times are like very few and far between, is if a
This
captain
may
is.
be an odd question, but is this why flying to the east and flying to the west from the east take 2 different times?
No, not as far as, not in relationship to magnetic north and true north. That's usually due to the winds and our jet stream. But
Oh, okay.
but yeah, so like I said, there's in a practical standpoint, actually having to interpret magnetic north and true north. The only time I can think of like actually ever having to use it at a desk for an airline is like if a captain were to call, and we have runways, certain airports where we can only fly one way in, one way out, like Aspen, Colorado. I mean, technically we could fly the other way out, but we really, 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 really don't like to because of terrain. So if the captain called and was like, what are the winds doing? And we actually had to get a wind report for the captain, that's the only time I could ever see that happening. But the captains are typically smart enough to know how to get that themselves and are usually not that lazy that they can't get that information themselves. But every once in a while, you get a really lazy captain that just doesn't want to be there. And so he'll start asking some really random questions. And it's almost like he's just trying to test your knowledge. But, it's the short and long of it is the only time that you're really ever going to use this is in this class for flight planning and when you do your practical test. And that's it. And like I said before, we're going to get a lot of practice using this and actually understanding this when we start flight planning. It'll make a lot more sense. So that's the long and short of that. Usually longer than shorter. Okay, so when we say, when we're referring to VORs, you'll see those VORs identified on the map, and you'll see this compass rose, kind of similar to this, and then you'll see an arrow, just a bolded arrow on it. That's magnetic north from that VOR. So that's the 0 line. You've kind of beat this one up. Transmit radio beams in what we call radials, and that offers our course guidance. VOR information is not influenced by the aircraft attitude or heading. So when we change direction or pitch our nose up or down, doesn't matter. when we're using a VOR, it won't actually influence it. It will always, that needle will always point, you know, directly to where it needs to be pointing. It doesn't change or deviate from its course. So, automatic monitoring systems. So the pilots have a volume button on the receiver to where they can turn it up, and you know, we kind of hit this, but when they tune into the station, into this VOR radio frequency, they can turn up the volume button on the receiver, and the VOR will actually transmit in Morse code the identification of the identifier of that station. VORs are always identified with a 3-letter identifier. So you'll have like TCH is Wasatch VOR in Salt Lake. You know, Mormon Mesa, I want to say Mormon Mesa is MMA. Milford VOR is MLF. You know, things like that. So they can actually tune into the station, turn up the volume, and they will hear the Morse code for, in the beeps, dots and dashes, they'll hear the 3-letter identifier. And then some of them even have a voice that will come on and say, this is the Mormon Mesa VOR, you know. But they used to only transmit in Morse code. And on our charts, the Morse code is always drawn on in those labels, those label boxes. You'll always see the Morse code for that station. So you can just kind of follow along. You don't really have to memorize the Morse code alphabet or anything like that. So it transmits that signal every 15 seconds. The VHF frequency range, so all stations will be somewhere within 108.0 to 117.95 megahertz. So that's where every single VOR is going to transmit, somewhere in that range. The limitation, unlike the DVD or NDB, this one is actually line of sight. You have to be within line of sight of the station. NDBs, you don't have to be line of sight. The VORs you do, and that's because of the frequency that it transmits at. It's a lot higher of a frequency. The other limitation is what we call reverse sensing. VORs are kind of confusing to learn how to use. I'm sure Rex can attest to that because of this reverse sensing. You can be flying to a VOR, you'll have a from indication, and you'll have the wrong radial. It's hard to explain, but you'll have the 180 degree, or what we call the reciprocal, in there with the wrong indication, and that's due to the user not tuning into the station correctly. So the limitation really is not necessarily the reverse sensing, but the user's ability to tune into the station properly. I don't know, Rex, do you have any words of wisdom on that reverse sensing?
As I recall, you're absolutely right. It was rather confusing, but there is a little line, a little needle that points on your radio, on your receiver, that lets you know if you are right of that radial or left of that radial.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps you to keep centered on it all the better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, it's called the course deviation needle. And we'll actually hit that here in just a second, but yeah, like you said, that reverse sensing when you're trying to navigate and you're following that course deviation needle. If you're not tuned in correctly, it'll mess you up.
It's one of the other reasons I quit flying.
Yeah. It gets really confusing if you're not like very familiar with how the system works. VOR, DME, VOR, VORTAC. We talked about these yesterday. The VOR DME just offers the distance measuring equipment, both azimuth and distance information. VORTAC, co-located with a tactical air navigation unit, provides, just like the VOR DME, azimuth and distance information. But it also provides military tactical air navigation as well. So, and that's how they look on our maps. Here you can see the Bryce Canyon VOR. Here's the 3-letter identifier for Bryce Canyon, BCE. This is the frequency the pilot tunes his receiver to, 112.8. The 75, you can notice that, or you notice that if you look back at this page, this is the Bryce Canyon VOR is actually a VORTAC. So this 75 next to BCE is actually what the military pilots will tune into on their navigational radio or their tactical information radios to get the TACAN portion of the VOR. And then, just kind of as I stated before, this is the Morse code for BCE. So you'd hear a longer beep and then 3 short beeps, long beep, short beep, long beep, short beep, and then a short beep every 15 seconds, and that's identifying that it's the BCE VOR. Then underneath that you have the longitude and latitude of the actual station, and it gives you a general idea of where it's located, near Cedar City. So but yeah, you can see Cedar City has the VOR DME. You've got Milford as a VORTAC, Page, VOR DME, so on. Any questions about any of that?
The reason it says Cedar City in this section, doesn't the FAA have a office, communications office there in Cedar City that falls under this jurisdiction?
Yeah, I believe that is where it is. But yeah, it just, like you said, it falls under the jurisdiction of Cedar City's radio communication office for the FAA. So it's maintained by that office. It's really what it's identifying. So. DME. So we talked about this a couple times now. determines our distance from a ground transmitter, operates on ultra-high frequency band of 962 to 1213 megahertz. The components that it's made up of, or that we're going to see it with, the different times that we'll see a DME is when we see a VOR DME, a VOR TAC, ILS with DME, or a localizer with DME. ILS and localizer are are used in approaches, instrument approaches. The VOR DME and the VOR TAC are en route environments. So, it uses a paired frequency, so the DME will always be paired with an additional frequency, whether that's the VOR, VOR TAC, ILS. It's always going to be paired with another frequency. You'll never have just like a standalone DME. Interrogates the VOR station, which transmits a responding signal, measures elapsed time between both signals. So here you can see what it's talking about. You can see the DME slant distance. So the plane, or the station will send out a signal to the airplane. The receiver inside the airplane will then transmit it back to the station, bounce it back off to the station, and that gives us our distance from the station. Think of it as like a speed gun, like a police officer uses. It uses that same kind of technology, where it's gonna, instead of transmitting speed though, it's gonna relate that in distance. But yeah, it's basically the same principle though. The receiver in the aircraft, it calculates the slant range. It calculates the slant range, the distance, time, and ground speed. It's accurate within a half nautical mile, or 3% of the distance to the station, whichever one is greater. So not horribly accurate, but accurate enough for us to use in navigation. The limitations are once again line of sight, because it's using an ultra high frequency. We have line of sight issues. The slant range is also an issue. So there's always greater area far and at low altitudes. So the further you are and the lower you are, the greater the error. Remember the half nautical mile, or 3% of the distance. That's where we're going to see this error increase over that half nautical mile. The error is negligible for anything less than 1 nautical mile for every 1,000 feet AGL. So that's talking about the slant range. So the higher you are, the less of an error. And then once again, so if you're high and like not very far from the station, that's when it's going to be the most accurate. But if you're high and close to the station, it's going to be inaccurate again, because as you approach the station, it's going that slant range, because of the angle it is and everything like that. That distance gets muddled by your altitude, or muddied with your altitude. So Just as an example, 6,000 feet directly over the station. That equals one. You'll see a 1 DME on your instrumentation. So, like I said, it's accounting for your distance vertically over the station. So, DME Arcs are a type of approach that we use. What we need to remember with this is that DME Arcs aren't a very typical approach anymore. We're seeing less and less of them as we get RNAV and RNP approaches, things like that. These DME arcs are disappearing quicker and quicker. An airport that I know has a DME arc would be like Grand Junction, Colorado. Has a DME arc for their approach. But all it's doing is transitioning us from our en route phase to an instrument approach. So the pilot, as he flies over this fix, he'll basically go into a bank at a set rate and maintain this DME from this VOR. So he's going to stay, the distance that is indicated on the chart, he'll stay that distance from this station until he crosses the initial approach fix. So it allows them to do the approach without actually flying over the station. And it requires a DME and a VOR receiver. So like I said, we're seeing less and less of these just because they're, we're seeing more and more of a transition to the satellite-based navigation due to its accuracy. So, and it's a lot more cost-effective. VOR volumes. So this is super, 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 super important to write down. I don't know why this picture is missing right now. What you guys need to write down is when we talk about service volumes, and this is something that will be asked in practicals, in interviews, all of the above, and it's something that you need to know when you're actually dispatching. If you need to file a ground-based navigational procedure or ground-based flight plan, IFR flight plan, you need to know the service volumes of the VOR. So when we talk about a high en route, what is the service volume of a high VOR? You guys need to have memorized 130 nautical miles. So whenever you're asked, what is the service volume of a high VOR? You need to respond 130 nautical miles. This will be on a test, like next week. In fact, you still need to take the test from the FARs.
That number again?
130 nautical miles. So when asked, what is the service volume of a low VOR, you need to say 40 nautical miles. And then if you are asked, what is the service volume of a terminal VOR, you need to say 25 nautical miles. So 130 for a high, 40 for a low, and then 25 for a terminal. Does everybody have that?
Yep.
Repeat those one more time, please.
Okay. The service volume of a high VOR is 130 nautical miles. The service volume of a low VOR is 40 nautical miles. And the service volume of a terminal VOR is 25 nautical miles.
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody got it, or? All right.
Got it.
And this is the VOR components. This is the receiver right here. This is that volume knob that we were talking about. This is how they tune into the radio stations. And as you can see here, we have two different frequencies that they're tuned into. Each one of our aircraft has two separate VOR navigational radios. And within each navigational radio, we have the capability of storing two frequencies. So the first one, the one where it says use here, this is what the pilot is currently using or tuned into. If he hits this white button with the double arrows on it, then it'll take this frequency on standby here over this standby, and it will swap these two frequencies. So it will show the 135.97 over here in this use section. So that way he can swap from VOR to VOR quicker rather than having to go without any navigation between stations. He can just push that button and it'll automatically jump to the next VOR in line. Does that make sense? So the antennas are once again on the outside of every one of the aircraft that use VORs. And then this is the indicator. So as Rex indicated before, this is the CDI needle or the course deviation needle, course deviation indicator. So when we are flying, let's say we're tuned into the 360 radial or 0 degree radial, the arrow's pointed directly north. If this CDI needle is centered, as it's showing here, then we are flying directly on that course. But as we, let's say that we're not quite on that radial, this CDI needle will sway to the left or to the right. And when it sways to the left or to the right, 1 dot equals 2 degrees. So 2 degrees off from the station. So 2 degrees off from 100 miles is going to mean something different than 2 degrees off at 20 miles from the station. But they have to do it in degrees. So when it says 2 degrees, the pilot will correct to basically get back on course. 60 miles equals 1 degree. So if you're 60 miles from the station and you're off half, then that means that you need to fly, or then you're 1 degree off here. And that's 1 nautical mile off course. So
One of the things that you might clarify is what are the things that cause one to get off course?
Pilot error. Um, that's pretty much the straight and honest truth. In the aircraft that we use in the airline environment, with autopilot, they'll do what we call speed mode, nav mode, and they have autopilot as well. So the computer inside the aircraft will automatically correct and make sure that they stay on course. If they ever are off course, it will automatically correct and make sure they get back on course. But
remember, one of the frustrating things during flight. Sorry, one of the frustrating things during flight was having a wind push you off your course.
Yeah,
And so you'd have to correct for wind deviation also.
yeah, and that's part of the calculation we're going to use when we're in doing our flight planning. Is we correct first for our magnetic variation or declination, and then we account for our wind correction. So we have an actual wind correction angle as well. And, wind's going to play a big factor in, especially when we're talking about long distances, wind's going to play a big factor in how we get from point A to point B. So pilot error is just saying, when I say that, and let's say the wind is what pushed him off course, not flying the correct course, that's the only time that the wind's actually going to have an effect on whether or not you're off on your course deviation. So then you'll also see on this instrument, you'll see the ambiguity to and from indicators. So depending on what radial we're tuned into, we'll get a to or a from indication. And where we are relative to the VOR, we'll get a to or a from indication. And then when the signal is not reliable, it will display a red flag in the instrument. So let's say that there's, remember that the VOR is line of sight navigation. If there's an obstacle in the way of the VOR signal, then that's when we would see these unreliable signal flags. Or if we're too far away from the station. Remember, high VORs, service volume 130 nautical miles, low VORs 40, terminal 25. So if we're tuned into a terminal VOR and we're 40 miles out from the station, we're probably going to see an unreliable signal flag. So why don't we take a 10-minute break? I need to wet my whistle here. So we'll get back on. Let's just, let's call it 6:50 is when we'll jump back on here. All right, is everybody back? All right. So let's talk about this HSI, Horizontal Situation Indicator. So HSI is much more advanced. Kind of similar to, that RMI that I showed you where it's got the VOR and the NDB navigation. The HSI uses even more precise instrumentation in order to display the data onto an instrument. So the HSI combines our course deviation indicator and then this DG and DG. I'm trying to remember what DG stands for. Directional guidance. So course deviation indicator and directional guidance. So combination of navigation information from the VOR or localizer, the LORAN, and GPS. So it's combining three types of precise navigation into one instrument to give us even more information than it just combines like the best of all the worlds into one instrument here. It provides us both horizontal and vertical guidance, known as a glide slope. The vertical guidance is a glide slope. It's slaved to the magnetic course, reduces the workload of the pilot, and there is no reverse sensing, unlike the VOR. So basically, it is like the bee's knees of ground-based navigation. And it even throws in a little bit of GPS in there. So this is how the HSI is depicted on a glass cockpit. So glass cockpit, this picture here, this is known as steam gauges, these old school instrumentation or instruments. They're known as steam gauges. Now we use what's called a glass cockpit, where it's just a screen with a whole bunch of information or different instruments combined into one centralized location. They're a lot nicer to fly in, that's for sure. But yeah, as you can see, they just take an HSI and just slapped it right down here in the bottom center of the screen. So, it's got all the same parts to the instrumentation, but it just puts it, in steam gauge world, we call this our artificial horizon. We've got our altimeter. Altimeter. This is our speed. Try to remember the steam gauge name for it. Speedometer. I don't know. I can't remember what we called it in the steam gauge world. This is what we call a vertical speed indicator on this side of the altimeter. This is all of our navigational. This is the navigational radios 1 and 2. This gives us different information as far as the GPS information goes. And then we can see our regular communication radios on this side. So basically all of the steam gauge information is displayed into one single screen. So it just makes life a lot less complicated. VOR test can be done on frequency 91.171. It's just a radio repair station. It's plus or minus 4 degrees. This information is all published in the AFD or Airport Facility Directory. We tested on the ground. The AFD, its tolerance is plus or minus 4 voice over. I can't remember what the voice over. Anyways, AFD, NDB, plus or minus 4. Airborne AFD, plus or minus 6. So not any information you really need to know there. That's all done by the pilot. Okay, let's talk about RNAV. We're going to start getting into the satellite-based navigation here. All that other information was using ground-based navigation. You'll be taking a test here this next week on navigational equipment. And there's a question on said test that says name 3 types of satellite-based navigation. So it'll ask you to name, 3 types of ground-based navigation. You got VOR, NDB, and you can say like ILS or localizer, anything like that. DME, any of those. For satellite navigation, we're looking for the next couple screens that you're going to see. So RNAV being one of them. RNAV uses satellites, allows the pilot to fly a selected course to a predetermined point or waypoint, as we talked about yesterday, without the need to overfly ground-based navigation facilities. It allows direct or optimum routes. RNAV-equipped RNAV equipment includes, so it's using information from the VOR DMEs, the LORANs, the GPS, and INS, which stands for Inertial Navigation Systems. So it basically takes information from all those different systems and paints a picture to give us these waypoints. So these waypoints, as you can see, using ground-based navigation, to fly to this point right here, we'd have to fly to the VOR DME, and then we'd have to fly out from the VOR DME to that station. But using RNAV, we can fly directly from this point, wherever it may be, to that waypoint in a direct course. And that's just a much more efficient use of the airspace. It reduces our dependence on radar, and it gives us optimum routes and altitudes. And then huge, like we said, everything in the airline world, they are always talking about saving when it comes to time and fuel. So just it provides all of that for us. So RNAV equipment can determine an aircraft position, position and track. It can also provide or determine our ground speed, the distance measuring equipment, so it can give us distance to these different waypoints. And then it can also provide us, unlike any of the ground-based navigation, it can provide us an ETA, or estimated time of arrival to that waypoint. So a lot better and a lot more efficient. Okay, advanced navigation systems. So RNAV was the first one. GNSS is our second one, our second type of satellite navigation. GNSS is a lot like the GPS you see in your car. It's very similar to that. Basically, it uses a constellation of satellites that provide that high frequency signal that is picked up by a receiver. The receiver triangulates its position from the satellites and then uses GPS, the US system, to determine your location relative to the triangulation. So the GNS system just is used to triangulate your exact position over an area. So GPS is the next type of satellite-based radio navigation. So counting on my fingers, we're at number 3 here. GPS broadcasts a signal. The aircraft receiver, so these satellites that are circling the globe, broadcast a signal. The aircraft receiver tracks multiple satellites to determine the aircraft position. The benefits of using satellites is like it says here, the signal is unaffected by weather. It will penetrate through the atmosphere, through clouds, through weather systems. Think about like transatlantic, transoceanic routes. You can't really put a VOR in the middle of the ocean, right? You could, but good luck. Good luck maintaining it. Good luck making sure that it's accurate consistently. Super not cost effective. GPS provides that for us without requiring an actual ground-based station. So the other benefit is over remote areas. So like, Vernal. Ew. No. Or Needles, Barstow. Gross. GPS uses VFR en route and terminal navigation. Or GPS can be used for VFR en route and terminal navigation, as well as for IFR en route, terminal ops, and instrument approach procedures into the runway. So the GPS system consists of 24 satellites. It's got ground-based stations still that monitor and control the satellites, and then the user aircraft antennas and receivers receive the signal and triangulate the position, like we said before. So it's kind of a mix between all three that are assisting in triangulating our position. GPS function, the concept of ranging and triangulation from satellites to form a reference point. The receiver measures the distance from the satellite, requires that there be 4 satellites in view overhead. So that's absolute minimum to triangulate your position. And that will yield a 3D position. So I'm sure Carrie, you've probably used GPS several times.
Absolutely.
You got any more information on GPS that you'd like to share?
No, this pretty much covers it. I mean, it's come a long way since it first came about. I mean, I've been around since it was only available to the military and aircraft. So it's now just, I mean, it's to the public, has the same 10-digit coordinate availability to them as the military does. So it's come a long way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's getting more and more accurate. I remember the first GPS that my dad bought, commercial use GPS. I believe the accuracy was down to like 30 meters or something like that. Which is pretty accurate, It's not bad. But now they can get down to like, we're talking centimeters of accuracy. Especially the military grade stuff can get down to where it's incredibly accurate. They can really zero in on things.
Yeah, we, in our howitzers, we actually utilize them. We have GPSs within our howitzers, and we just use another GPS to verify the accuracy of the GPS system that's in the howitzer. So they just kind of validate each other, just make sure they're bumping with each other. So
so you guys would perform a rain check on your GPS?
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Awesome. Yeah, very similar to the aviation world. Just out of curiosity, talking about artillery and howitzers. So this is a little more personal of a question, but did you ever fire the Excalibur GPS guided munition out of the howitzer?
No, I never did. I shot thousands of rounds out of Ramadi and Fallujah back in 05 and 06, and they were just starting to field the Excalibur at the time. So I've never shot an Excalibur, but basically you just you get that thing up in the air, and then it's just guided in by GPS. So it's pretty amazing. I've watched training videos on how it works, and you can actually point that thing in the howitzer in the exact opposite direction of the target, and it still will hone in on the target. It'll circle back around and land where it needs to go. So
yeah, I actually worked for the company that built the GPS circuit card that was put into the Excaliburs.
Wow, that's cool.
So yeah, I was one of 4 inspectors qualified to actually do final quality inspections on the Excalibur circuit cards.
Well, unfortunately, when it comes to training, it's more quantity instead of quality when it comes time for us to go out to Dugway and shoot. So they just buy as many bullets as they can with the money that we have, and and those Excaliburs are pretty pricey. So
Yeah.
so we just buy the old stuff.
Yeah, I'm sure.
We just get more bang for the buck that way. Because inside the howitzer, it's all the same to us. You know, we just the loading and firing is the same process. So
Yeah, that's awesome.
we
though.
don't ever see what happens down on the other end because they go so far.
Yeah, I remember in development. Sorry, and I'm getting off track. Like I said, I'm kind of like that dog on home or up. I always say home up. Anyways, yeah, we were watching an actual demonstration video of that Excalibur, and when we, uh, finally passed all of the testing and everything, they said in over 20 miles, if it, firing around 20 miles, they could fire it 4 miles off course, so off trajectory, and the munition would still be accurate within 3 meters, which is well inside the kill radius of anything that we are intending to hit. So pretty cool stuff. And I know that they got that even more accurate, but anyways, sorry, I get sidetracked with those different things, but anyways, that's really cool stuff. GPS is used in everything from your vehicles to your cell phones to complex military equipment. So there's hundreds of these satellites orbiting the Earth now, and like I said before, they can triangulate your position very accurately, almost scary accurately. When we were talking about rain checking, which is this next screen. So RAIN stands for Receiver Autonomous Integrity Monitoring. So all that we're doing with a rain check, this isn't a form of GPS or satellite-based navigation. This is a way of verifying the accuracy of our navigation, of the GPS satellites. So what we'll do is before every flight, and it's done automatically when we're planning our flights, and if it doesn't pass, it comes up with an error. But every single flight, we verify the accuracy of the aircraft's GPS unit to the satellite units overhead. And we do this for every single flight. So the GPS receiver verifies usability or integrity of the GPS constellation signals through RAIN, and it determines if a satellite is providing corrupt information. Without RAIN capability, no assurance of accuracy of GPS position. So if we fail a RAIN check, then basically we can't use GPS navigation for that flight. We'd have to use all ground-based navigation. So RAIN checks, pretty important. To perform a RAIN capability function, you need to have at least 5 satellites in view. 4 give us our position, and the 5th gives us an extra and basically navigational information. So we always have to have at least 5. Now, typically, and you can check me on this, but I believe we're typically not going to go with the minimum there. Typically, we want to see at least 7. Is that correct? Terry?
Yeah, 7 is the minimum, at least on our side of the house, in order to make sure you're receiving the maximum amount of satellites for for the best reading available.
Yeah. So minimum we have to have 5, but we like to see 7. That's going to give us the most accurate positioning. So, like I said, RAIM outages, bad stuff. Not enough satellites available to provide RAIM. These are the messages that we receive. Or we'll see RAIM detected a potential error. The causes of these RAIM outages are insufficient number of satellites, poor satellite geometry leads to a large position error, or change in aircraft dynamics such as banking obscures the GPS satellite signal, which must be received line of sight. So, a couple different ways to fail a RAIM check, but these are our most common causes of that. The other thing that I can think of causing a fail in or a RAIM outage is something I saw today. Occasionally, the military likes to jam the satellite signal just to make sure that their equipment still works and everything's working good. So they'll actually they'll tell us, we're going to be jamming the satellite from this time to this time, or within this window, at some point within this window. And in that case, we just have to plan on not using GPS navigation. So, there's just certain point in time where the military decides to run a test and make sure that they can still do it, and then once they've completed their testing, everything goes back up and we're good to go again.
How long does a test last?
Today, it can vary, but like today there were 2 separate 2-hour windows over a specific airport where they had jammed the signal. So,
Rex, we've had them actually shut it down for a week at a time when we've been out shooting at Dugway. So, like Garrett's saying, it just depends on how long they're doing maintenance or want to shut it down. So it can just vary. But they usually will give you a heads up. So you just have to kind of plan accordingly.
Yeah, they give you a period of time, but yeah, it can vary. Just depends on what they're doing. Today, they specifically told us that it was they were testing their systems and actually jamming the satellites, but yeah. So yeah, those are some of the ways that we can fill our RAIM checks. So GPS for IFR certification. So we have to have this IFR certification in order to use GPS navigation. Basically, they just test it and make sure that it meets the standards of Technical Standards Order, TSO. This does not include GPS for VFR or handheld GPS units. And in those cases, when we're talking about GPS or VFR, the handheld GPS units or VFR, those can only be used for situational awareness only. Can't use them for any other scenario. Can't use them to actually navigate. My cousin, he has a small private aircraft. It's called a Burt Rutan Very Easy, and he flies with his iPad and has a GPS in his iPad, and technically he can't use that for IFR navigation. It's strictly just situational awareness only. So The GPS in the aircraft has to meet airworthiness installation. They actually have to have an AP&P mechanic come in and verify that it meets the airworthiness installation standard. It must be approved for IFR, operated in accordance with the pilot operating handbook or the airline flight manual or flight manual supplement. So we can't just like play with this thing. We actually have to operate it in accordance with our manuals. It has to have a GPS database or waypoint database updated for the type of operation. So, back in the day, like in my wife's Camry, it has an actual CD, a DVD that we'd slide in there with that year's maps. It's similar to that for an aircraft. They have to go in and update these databases every 30 days, I want to say it is, in the aircraft, with any new waypoints or any updates to the system. So the FSS, Flight Service Station, will verify GPS rain availability. Some GPS receivers have the capability to predict rain. All of our aircraft do. GPS NOTAMs, they just notify us of these satellite outages. So there's times where it'll just say, the signal, the GPS signal may not be available, and we have to go and check and make sure that during the time of our operation of our flight, that those stations that it says on the NOTAMs are actually operable. So GPS for IFR en route and terminal navigation. For en route navigation, must have an alternate means of navigation appropriate for the route of flight destination alternate. That means that we have to have ground-based navigational aids operable. When we look at our instrument approach plates, you'll actually see what we're talking about here. And this is why in this class, we do not use RNAV for training, is because we have to have a very solid foundation, and not every airline uses GPS or satellite navigation necessarily. Some supplemental air carriers don't use GPS. So we want you to have a very solid foundation in ground-based equipment, because ground base is always required. If we don't have ground-based navigational aids, then basically we have to look at other options as far as choosing our alternates or our approach procedures. So alternate airports must have a non-GPS instrument approach operable. So this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is GPS is still new enough that the FAA is not quite ready to let go and just let GPS take its course. They still want us to use, or to at least have, a ground-based approach available. And if it does not, then then we can't use that airport as an alternate airport. Oh, excuse me. They want us to have redundancy in everything that we do. So just like everything government. So they always want redundancy. So the other type of satellite navigation that we're going to talk about is WAS and LOS. So wide area and local area augmentation system. So WAS and LOS is basically just an upgraded version of GPS. It's more accurate. So It uses a combination of both ground-based and GPS signals, which improves its accuracy, integrity, and availability of GPS signals. Receivers use 2 geostationary WASP satellites. So there's satellites that rotate around the Earth at the same exact speed as the Earth's rotation. These satellites, like if you were to look up in the sky, it's just rotating with the Earth, so it'd look like a star. Performance enables instrument approach procedures, GPS WASP glide paths. GPS precision approaches with vertical guidance. So GPS approaches only use a lateral or horizontal signal. It will only tell us our location as far as like laterally, not vertically. The vertical guidance, the WASP will allow us to use vertical guidance as well. So it's a lot more accurate. LPV, so lateral precision approach with vertical guidance is based on the WASP. LNAV and VNAV, lateral and vertical guidance. Those are the minimums that we're allowed to use, are LNAV and VNAV minimums, depending on the aircraft that we're using, that we're flying. Some of them are capable of using both LNAV and VNAV. So, and we'll talk about LNAV and VNAV at a future point in time. During our flight planning, we'll hit this LNAV and VNAV and show you what we mean by minimums using LNAV and VNAV. So WASP and LOS, you can see here, we've got ground-based stations, the LOS ground facilities, GPS reference receivers, but then we also combine that with GPS satellites to give us a very, very, very accurate position. This is where we start seeing those centimeters come into play, is when we're using these WASP and LOS satellites. So, as you can see on this picture on the left, it will give us a precision approach for category 1, 2, and 3 approaches. Category 3, which we'll talk about in just a second here, basically allows them to land with up to 0 visibility. So they don't ever see the ground until they're on it. And even then, sometimes they can't really see it very well. Pretty scary approaches. It also shows like ground position. So when airplanes are taxiing around on the ground, you can see them. So inertial navigation systems. It's a computer-based navigation system. It's part of the system that our GPS and different instrumentation like that uses. It tracks the movement of aircraft via signals produced by onboard accelerometers. So think of it as like the accelerometers inside your cell phone, or the GPS inside your cell phone. Uses that same basic principle, using accelerometers to determine position. It's fully self-contained. It's initialized by the pilot before each flight, enters in the system location of an aircraft on the ground. Subsequent movement of the aircraft is sensed and used to keep aircraft updated. navigates without any input from outside aircraft, and can be programmed with waypoints along the route of flight. So this is something that just is, it just works. Doesn't require a whole lot of input from the pilot himself. So it's more of like a auxiliary system than it is a primary system. So now let's talk about some of the instrumentation we use for navigation. So these are the supporting equipment for our aircraft's navigation. So air data computers. These air data computers use different probes on the outside of the aircraft. The probes that it uses are pedostatic, so pedal pressure and static pressure. I'll pull up a picture of these pedo tubes and static ports. Just to kind of show you guys what it's all about. If you really want to get crazy, you can see all these diagrams of how it actually works. As dispatchers, we really just do not care how it works. It uses a diaphragm to basically change or to sense differences in pressures, but pedo tubes use ram air to determine things like speed, indicated airspeed. This is what a pedo tube looks like on an aircraft. That being said, on a jet aircraft, it's not going to look exactly like this. It'll look close to this, but it'll just be in a different position on the aircraft. But you can see it's just this tube that is pointed towards the nose of the aircraft, and it uses ram air to provide the instrumentation inside the cockpit with actual data. Like I said, you can get all crazy and actually read these diagrams if you are really curious as to how it works. Let's see if they got a picture of static port. So this is what a static port looks like on an aircraft. Looks like a shower drain, kind of. But rather than being pointed directly into the wind, these static ports are typically flush with the surface of the aircraft. But the combination of the two instruments is what provides the pilot with things like altitude, vertical speed, attitude, things like that. It's going to indicated airspeed. It's just going to use static differences in the atmosphere to determine those different settings. So, or the different indications that the pilot will see. So this is used for several different systems on board the aircraft. I've named off a couple: altimeter, vertical speed indicator, things like that, indicated airspeed. It's going to calculate all of that. Oh, and air temperature. Each one of our aircraft have 2 on board. And in order to operate in what we know as RVSM airspace, so we're talking about flight levels above 29,000 feet to 41,000 feet. We call that RVSM airspace, and that just allows planes to fly closer together. It requires less separation, and it helps air traffic control get more airplanes through a section of airspace quicker and less congestion. So, yeah, we have 2 of those on board, and both have to be working for us to operate in that RVSM airspace. So, flight director systems. These flight director systems is just combination of several instruments, like we said before. The glass cockpit is how we're going to see it. These glass cockpits just put a ton of information. We call it the flight director system. It just combines all of that instrumentation into one centralized screen to allow the pilot. It provides them with easy interpretation of the flight path, basically. Components include the altitude or attitude direction indicator, horizontal speed indicator, HSI. Oh my gosh, we just went over HSI. Trying to remember the actual horizontal situation. There we go. Got him. It also provides the mode controller flight director computer. So all that information in one centralized screen. And more. The integrated flight control system is very similar to the flight director system. Once again, integrates various systems into one component. It has the flight director system, but it also comprises, it also has the airframe and autopilot on the screen as well. Autopilot allows mechanical controls, so it will control the the aircraft surfaces to maintain, things like altitude, heading, things like that, yaw, pitch, and roll. So that's what the autopilot system does. Automatically flies the plane all by itself. FMS. I've showed you guys a couple FMS. A lot of people think of the FMS as the ACARS. Well, the ACARS is part of the FMS. It's not the FMS. The FMS does a lot more than just send text messages and emojis to dispatchers. Does a lot more than that. The concept is it's a master computer to interface with all navigation sensors. So this is the nerve cell of the entire aircraft. Combines the GPS, the CDU, all of that into one centralized unit. So the GPS is the dominant force in the FMS, I guess you could say. It's the main part of the FMS, but it is not, once again, it is an independent system, but integrated with the FMS. The control display unit is what you can see here, just this display. Interfaces with the master computer and provides single control point for all navigation systems. So every time the pilot is on the ground and gets his flight plan from the dispatch release, he enters it in on this FMS. He will enter in all of the waypoints that they plan to fly through, the altitudes that they plan to fly them at, and we'll put where the top of descent is and the top of climb is. And then basically they get to the end of the runway, they throttle up as soon as they lift off the runway and put the landing gear up. They turn on the autopilot, and the FMS sends all the information to the autopilot as to where the aircraft needs to fly. So, the pilots are there to take off and land, sometimes not even do that. And other than that, they sit there and monitor the FMS. The operations, it's got an electronic database that stores all of its navigational aids, airways, SID, stars, instrument approach, procedures. And like I said before, I said 30 days, it's actually 28 days. So updated every 28 days. Input into the CDU to create a flight plan. So they'll go through and they'll put in all those waypoints, like I said before. It provides data on the display, and then the commands, it tells the aircraft where to go. And it'll even, control the autopilot and say, hey, turn left at this heading, this bank angle, this speed, blah, blah, blah. And the plane will do it without any pilot input, any human input. So provides that lateral and vertical navigation guides on instrument approach procedures. So the FMS can provide those LNAV and BNAV guidance. The FMS interfaces with other aircraft systems to provide things like fuel management, display systems, graphic weather display, air and ground data links, and like I said before, the ACARs. So this is what the screen of the FMS looks like. These are the different waypoints. This is the heading the aircraft's going to fly. This is the distance between each one of those headings. This is the altitude that wants it to be at. Things like that. It's all displayed there on the FMS. The EFIS. So the EFIS, as you can see here, is going to be between, it depends on the aircraft really. It's the center display, whether the pilot and the captain and the first officer both have their own or share one screen, is all dependent on what aircraft they're flying in. So the purpose of the EFIS, and we're going to get more into this when we talk actual aircraft systems, but it basically is a computer that will tell the pilot if there's any problems going on with the aircraft. The EFIS will display with an aural and a visual alert if there's problems with the aircraft. Things like, if there's a master caution that comes on, it'll tell the pilot, hey, left engine's on fire. It will, give the pilot an aural, like an audio or audio warning saying, in a certain pattern. And then the pilot, he can look at the screen and it'll actually tell him what's going on. The other thing that the EFIS does is it'll display things like our engine settings, internal temperature, internal turbine temperature, or ITT, the N1 speed, N2 speed of the fan blades. And then it'll also display things like your ICAS. It'll display your, pneumatic systems. It'll display your, if you have doors open, the different flight controls. The pilots can see without having to actually look at the outside of the aircraft. It will display, if they have full deflection on the ailerons and elevators and all that jazz. So makes those pre-flight checks a lot easier. Okay. I think it's time for a dinner break. Anybody opposed? I didn't think so. Why don't we all jump back on here at 8:10? Sound good?
Sounds good.
All righty. See you back in a minute. All right. Hopefully, everybody's back. Okay, let's talk about these, what we've seen them as. I mean, the way we've seen instrument approach systems referred to so far is IAP, instrument approach plates. But these systems, typically when we're referring to an IAP or an instrument approach, we're going to be talking about ILS. ILS is ground-based navigational aids that give us the low. They're probably the most reliable of the systems that we use, and they give us our lowest minimums that we can get. When we talk about Category 1, and for the purpose of this class, the only category that we're going to use for approaches, typically you have to be instrument rated, equipped with the proper equipment, and current with your, as you know, be current in the type and type of aircraft you're flying and with the equipment that you're using. So usually the minimums are 1/2 mile or 2400 RVR, sorry, 1/2 mile or 2400 RVR and 200-foot decision height. So when we say decision height, we're talking about the height above the ground, also known as AGL. So that's typically what a Category 1 ILS approach is going to be. There's exceptions to this rule, as always, but that's kind of the standard. When we talk about Category 2 ILS approaches, we're talking about special certifications. So the airline or the company has special certifications that allow them to use lower minimums, lower visibility, lower ceilings in order to shoot the approach. This is typically consisting of a 1200-foot RVR and a 100-foot decision height. So cut Category 1 in half and you got Category 2. This is, you know, SkyWest, again, using the company we're familiar with. We are rated for Category 2 landings, and that's a pretty hairy landing, pretty sketchy landing. There's special requirements as far as equipment goes on board the aircraft in order to even shoot the Category 2 approach, as well as certain requirements for the crew as well. And we talked about high minimums. Captains can't shoot a Category 2 approach. Well, that's why. It's because it's literally half of the standard minimums. And then the last and final category of landing minimums would be Category 3. Within Category 3, there's 3 separate classifications. So you have an A, B, and C. Once again, this is going to require special certification not only for the pilots, but for the airlines and for the aircraft that the pilots are flying. Only very specific aircraft can shoot these approaches. They have to have very special equipment inside the aircraft. Some of those being like a heads-up display, auto land system, things of that nature. So yeah, that's where the special certification comes in. The RVRs for, and remember when we refer to RVR, we're talking about runway visual, excuse me, we're talking about runway visual range. So they don't even have to have a decision height requirement. There's no ceiling requirement. It's strictly going off of how far down the runway can you see. Category A is 700 feet, Category B is 150 feet, and Category C, they don't have to see a damn thing. They literally, even when they're on the runway, don't even have to be able to see the ground for a Category 3C approach. Pretty insane. There's only very special aircraft and very special airports that will allow a Category 3 ILS approach. So, yeah. And just for kicks and giggles, because I enjoy watching them myself, we're going to pull up what a Category 3C landing looks like. So let me pull that up here. So here it is in the chat window for y'all. If I can pull that up. Yep, Auckland, New Zealand. Okay, everybody pull that up on your YouTubes and take a gander of what landing in no visibility Man, those Airbuses are mean. Jeez. I believe that was an Airbus A380. And just so you guys have reference as to what an Airbus A380 looks like, they're huge. There you go. There's a nice head-on shot.
It's part of the video we watched yesterday.
Yeah, you guys saw an A380 on there. I saw my first one ever this year, and I was just completely flabbergasted that something that gigantic could actually get off the ground. They're massive. I saw one parked next to a 747 in San Francisco this last week, and it made the 747, and if you guys have ever seen a 747, it made the 747 look like 737. I don't know. A much smaller airplane. This is the 747, the one with the hump. So, massive. I don't know that that was even considered a Category 3C approach, because I saw the approach lights when the computer was calling out at least 100, so I would almost consider that just a Category 2 landing still. But you get the point. You know, it's pretty scary, pretty intimidating when you're flying that fast into the ground that you can't see, and you got to stop on that piece of pavement. Pretty insane. Yeah. So let's talk about ILS components. Once again, we'll get even more detailed with these ILS approaches and things like that as we get into the course further and further. We just keep building on basic knowledge and increasing it. So ILS components. So you've got the lateral guidance or the localizer. When we talk about the localizer, we're talking about this cross member, so the horizontal deviation from the runway. The glide slope provides us the vertical guidance. So how high or low we are in reference to the touchdown zone or touchdown point of the runway. As far as these other middle marker and outer compass, we don't use those anymore. So you can just erase those from your mind. Uses the DME and then these compass locators, but again, we don't even think of those. They don't exist anymore. The visual indicators that we have for an approach into a runway would be the approach lights, whether that be the approach lighting system, the runway center line lights, or the touchdown zone lights. Those are the different lights that we will see coming into a runway. So we've got the navigational equipment and we have visual equipment as well. So when we talk about precision and non-precision approaches, that's when we're going to kind of dissect some of this. But really this picture is just giving you an idea of how the instrument inside the aircraft will look in reference to where you are on the glide slope or the localizer. A lot more pilot information than dispatch information. We just need to know if the localizer is out, that's bad. That takes out the whole ILS. If the glide slope's out, we can still use the localizer. We just have increased landing minimums. So, but if the whole ILS approach is out, we can't use an instrument approach into that airport. This shows you the ranges of those localizer antennas and the width at these different distances. So 10 nautical miles, we have a 35-degree beam. And at 18 nautical miles, we have an 18-degree beam. So yeah. So glide slope, once again, just giving us the angle it is to the runway. So the glide slope is transmitted in a 3-degree slope into the runway. Typically, our instrument approach plates will actually give us the actual glide slope, but the standard will be 3 degrees. So we'll descend along that 3-degree slope into the runway until we touch down on the runway. The total thickness is 1.4 degrees thick, and that means that from the center line, it's 0.7 degrees on either side of the intended course. So, and this is out at 10 nautical miles. Typically, this is once again using standard glide slope, standard ILS. So, don't care about that. So these are the visual approach light systems. Depending on the type of approach we want to use, whether it be category 1, 2, or 3, or depending on the specifics of the runway that we are using, we will have these different lighting systems. So your category 1 and 2 are going to use all the lights in the world. You're going to look like Clark Griswold on Christmas Vacation when you turn these things up to max intensity. So it's extremely bright, as you saw in that video. That was an ALSIF 1 approach light system, and it's blinding how bright those things are. And when it's nighttime and you have these freaking headlights right in your eyes, it sucks. So, but we can turn them up in the cockpit. You can turn them up and down. The intensity or brightness. So, but yeah, I've actually got a cool picture. Wonder if I can find it really quick. There's a really cool picture that I like to show people that's of all the approach light systems. Oops. Oh Lord, here we go. Getting warmer. Here we go. Oh, that's a bad picture. It's not the right size. I know it's in here somewhere. It's much bigger. All right, there you go. Here's all of your different approach light systems. Can everybody see that? Let's see if I can see them. Yeah. So these we call odals, Malsif, Malzar, Salifs, Salers, Alsif 1, Alsif 2, Rails, Calvert, Calvert 2, Mols, Sols, and Cells. So depending on the type of approach we're using, or what that runway is capable of doing, will determine what approach light system we will see at the end of the runway. So if it's a category 1 type runway, you're going to see all the lights off the end of the runway. Category 2s can use either one of those, and so on and so forth. The centerline lights, as you can imagine, are down the center of the runway. These are high intensity runway lights on either side. I'm sorry. I believe these are the high intensity runway lights. Centerline, this is the touchdown zone lights. This is the threshold lights here, this green bar, and then your light system, your approach light system. So, and as you can see in some of these pictures, you can see the strobes. So clear out here, you'll have strobes, and they'll they call it chasing. It'll just chase up the runway to that threshold line, or the threshold line. So you'll just see the strobe chase up to that point continuously. So, and you could kind of see that in that video that we just watched as well. Let's pull this back up. Okie dokie. Here we have the VASI, is what we call it. Typically at the bigger airports, we're not going to have a VASI anymore. Now you're going to see what we call a PAPI, P-A-P-I, Precision Approach Path Indicator. And instead of lights on 4 lights, 2 on top of each other, it'll be 4 lights to the left, so horizontally rather than like this. So in this case, you can see that this is indicating where the pilot is in reference to the glide path or glide slope into the runway. There's some sayings that pilots use for these VASI systems, like this double red over red, you're dead Fred. Red over white, that's just right. White over white, stay in flight. that's just how we use, or what we use. If we're landing long, if we're going to end up clear halfway down the runway, that's what we'll see. If we're going to land right on this touchdown zone right here, we'll see that red over white. And if we're going to land in the field, the farmer's field, before we even get to the runway, that's what we'll see. So, yeah. Types of localizer approaches. We've got a couple different types. LDAs, localizer directional aid. So an LDA approach is just giving that localizer directional or lateral directional aid. So it's not aligned with the runway, and the width is 3 to 6 degrees off the end of the runway. Simplified, an SDF or simplified directional facility aligned within 3 degrees of the runway, width is 6 or 12 degrees. And then we have just a plain old localizer BC approaches, which I honestly never see these anymore. Localizer only. We typically will only see an LDA or a localizer approach. So in St. George, we have an LDA approach, actually. MLS, microwave landing system. Ground-based navigational aid, precision approach capable. So when we say precision approach, once again, we're talking about both lateral and vertical guidance. That T that you saw on the previous screen, a couple screens back. When we talk about a non-precision approach, we're only receiving that lateral guidance. Precision, both lateral and vertical guidance. And that's something that I would write down and memorize for future information. And that is, precision approach provides both lateral and vertical navigation. Non-precision approach only provides lateral navigation or guidance. Does anybody need me to repeat that?
Please.
Okay. Precision approach provides both vertical and lateral guidance or navigation. A non-precision approach provides only lateral guidance or navigation. Everybody got it?
Non-precision provides only lateral guidance.
Correct.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, so these MLS, once again, these are precision approach capable. Similar to the ILS, it provides azimuth, elevation, and distance, and allows curved approaches. Super expensive. You'll see these at airports that, let's say, have mountainous terrain but are busy. That's typically where you would see an MLS. One thing that you guys are going to be asked, a future test question, is name a couple precision approaches. Those are going to be ILS, MLS, and I want to say RNAV as well. RNP. I'm sorry, RNP, not RNAV. RNP approaches. Types of non-precision approaches would be these: LDAs, SDFs, localizer, VOR. So write down precision, ILS, MLS, RNP. Non-precision, LDA, SDF, localizer or LOC, and VOR or DME Arcs. Those are non-precision as well. Okay, RMP approaches. So this is the future of our navigation system. This is where everybody's going, is to RMP. RMP is called Required Navigation Performance. It uses RNAV with onboard navigation and alerting. It's the new standard of navigation and airspace management, navigation performance required within a defined airspace. So typically these RNPs are when we're in the vicinity of an airport. That's when we're going to see RNP. RNP approaches. That's what they are. It gives us navigation performance necessary for operation within a defined airspace. So we're talking, Class B. Let's think about stuff like that. Aircraft navigation systems have the ability to monitor its own navigation performance and identify if operational requirements are being met. The advantages would be less reliance on air traffic control, intervention, and or route separation. So we can get a lot more planes through a lot tighter area a lot quicker with RNP. Like I said before, reductions in fuel cost. Whenever you're talking the almighty dollar, you're talking airline language. And we talk about cost savings. So RNP, that's why everybody's going that way. Huge cost savings, less reliance on air traffic control intervention, and the aircraft are just smarter all around. So they can, let me show you what RNP kind of does. Let me see if I can find that graph. Okay. So it's tiny. Uno momento, por favor. That means 1 minute, please. Okay. LaGuardia Airport. If you look at just standard shooting the ILS approach, you're going to see that it looks like a string of spaghetti mess like this. Air traffic control is constantly turning them in at different intervals, different times. It's really relying on air traffic control to provide the separation of the aircraft. When we talk about RNP, the aircraft is already going to do it by itself. So everything is streamlined, and you can see the approach into that airport. Much more streamlined, much more efficient, and much less intervention with air traffic control. And this is just, plotting 100 different approaches or whatever the number is. And this is the same 100 approaches using RNP. So you can see how much more efficient and streamlined everything is when we use RMP approaches. RMP's ICAO. You'll see ICAO a lot. I can't even remember what it stands for, but it's like the governing body worldwide for aviation. So the values are for oceanic en route and terminal approaches, terminal or approaches. So they can use RMP pretty much wherever they want to. They basically create using GPS and RNAV. They can create their own routes that just it's like GPS but on steroids. It allows them to create these paths into the terminal area that don't require any external, talking about like ground-based navigation. It doesn't require any of that to streamline this all into the airport or into the terminal environment. There you go. ICAO, International Civil. Let me pull up. Comments here. International Civil Aviation Organization. It's kind of like NATO for aviation. I don't know what to relate it to. Anyways, yeah, RMP, good stuff. This is a heads-up display. This is what allows pilots to do those Cat 3 landings. This looks like a military aircraft. This doesn't look like just a civilian normal airplane. Check out that 1980s Cyborg headset. Anyways, heads-up displays provides a projection of navigation and air data onto a screen between the pilot and the windshield. Any information on the aircraft flight computer can be displayed, and it's displayed in a separate panel or an eyepiece. So once again, going back to my previous occupation. This is a system that L3 developed for the soldiers on the ground. They carry these heads-up display units. We call them ISRs. Let's see. He doesn't actually have it on. But basically, it's a pair of Oakleys that have a heads-up display unit on it, on one of the lenses, and the lens, the heads-up display unit, will receive real-time battle data. It's kind of like an overlay of what's happening in or around them. Let's see if any of these guys have ISRs on. It's a pretty sweet system. Anyways, yeah. Oh, This is kind of a description of what it does. So you got the ground forces, you got satellites, aircraft, other ground networks, drones, all of it communicating and basically painting a picture of enemy locations on the battlefield, friendly locations, etc. So these ground forces can see exactly what's going on the battlefield in front of them through this heads-up display. That's what it looks like. Virtual world. Not really. Anyways, similar to this system. This system, if you guys have ever flown a flight simulator, these heads-up display units, when they're shooting a Cat 3 approach, basically it's just like on those simulators when you fly through the little floating boxes, you know, when you're doing like a landing tutorial on a flight simulator. That's pretty much exactly what the pilot sees. He flies through boxes to make sure that he's coming into the runway at the correct angle. So safety systems, radar, radio altimeter. It gives us an altitude alerting systems, so it alerts us when we're too close to the ground and not over a runway. I don't know if you guys have ever heard like like in a flight simulator or on a movie, you'll hear the box. We have a very special name for it in the military. You'll hear the box just start saying, terrain, terrain, pull up, terrain, terrain, pull up. That's the altitude alerting system. So it provides absolute altitude on approach, and then it gives info to onboard systems, the autopilot, flight director, auto land system, etc. The components consist of a receiver, antenna, and transmitter, just like everything else on the airplane. This GPWIS is what actually, so the radar, that radio altimeter is what's talking to this, we call it the GPWIS, ground proximity warning system. That's what is giving the actual RL alert to the pilot. Can be tied into the landing gear, flaps, ILS, and then it gives also the glide slope advisory call out. So when we're flying down and like on that video that we just watched of the supposed Cat 3 landing, when you heard it say 1,000, it was telling pilots you're 1,000 feet above the ground, and then it said 500, 400, 300, 200, minimums 100, and then a countdown from 50 feet. That's the GPWIS. The TAWS, or Terrain Awareness System, warning system, uses GPS and database of terrain, provides the same RL and visual warnings, and it's required for turbine U.S. aircraft with more than 6 passengers on board. Jets, we don't really care because we can fly over Mount Everest no problem. Turbines, they tend to be a little closer to the ground. So TCAS, traffic alerting systems. So we've got 2 different things here. We got TIS, traffic information system. It's a ground-based service that uses Mode S transponders and altitude encoders. Whole bunch of crap. The transponder is what sends a signal from the aircraft to the ground, and basically tells air traffic control or other aircraft your location in the sky. It displays aircraft within 7 nautical miles plus or minus 3,500 feet from your position. So, total of 7,000 feet and within 7 nautical miles of your position. The MODES transponder, every time that an airplane talks to air traffic control, typically air traffic control is going to say, we're going to call in and say, hey, we want some, or we're ready to take off. You're going to have the controller come back on and say, this airplane squawk this code. And what he's telling the airplane to do is, in the transponder, there's a 4-digit code that's unique to your aircraft. And so when you dial in this code, no other airplane in your area has that same code at any given time. So it is very unique to your aircraft. And it'll pop up on their radar as that code. They'll see that code. It fills in the box with all of the flight information. And then they'll say, SkyWest 7354, radar contact, and then they'll give you a bunch of directions. But they're just letting you know that they can now see you and identify you on their radar screen. That's what the MODES transponder with altitude encoder does.
Is this the system that's used to do flight following?
Yeah, exactly. When we're in certain like Class B airspace, it's actually required. Mode C transponder in Class B. But when we're in Class A airspace, it's required to have a MODES with altitude encoding. And you can see kind of what the TCAS looks like, or what this MODES transponder looks like on the TCAS system. You can see these are targets, is what we call them. You can see this target has a 00, and it's directly in front of the aircraft. That means that airplane is at your same flight level directly in front of you. So it's going to start warning the pilot, hey, he's getting pretty close. You might want to do something. You can see this aircraft over here is 1,100 feet above, all these other different things. This is set at a 5 nautical mile range. This is a TCAS 1. We have TCAS 2 in our aircraft, but TCAS stands for Terminal Collision Avoidance System. It increases the pilot's awareness, prevents mid-air collisions. Mid-air collisions are pretty horrifying. We had one happen pretty much directly over my house when I was like 7 years old. Had a small private aircraft collide with a commercial jet, a business jet, corporate jet. It killed.
That was actually a SkyWest flight.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, in Brasilia. It's either Brasilia or Metroliner, but I think it was a Brasilia.
Oh, are you talking about the one up in Salt Lake?
The one in airport and terminal number 2 or airport number 2.
Yeah, that one. That's the one.
That was a SkyWest flight.
Yeah. Yeah, that happened directly over my house. I was in elementary school at the time, and they actually put the school on lockdown and everything because they were cleaning up a big mess. pretty horrifying stuff. But this TCAS system helps pilots be aware of traffic in and around them. And this airborne system, it's independent of ground air traffic control systems. So this is something that the pilot sees that air traffic control doesn't necessarily see the same thing. The antenna receives Mode S bearing and then Mode C aircraft altitude. And then it uses the timing of the Mode S to determine the location of the aircraft. TCAS 1 only provides advisories. It will only tell us, hey, there's an airplane in front of us. And it's required for any aircraft with 10 to 30 passengers. Now, TCAS 2 provides a lot more information. So it does everything that TCAS 1 does, but it also provides projected flight path and then issues resolution advisories. So what it'll tell this plane to do, let's say these planes are coming head to head, it'll tell this plane to turn to the right and descend, and this plane to turn to the right and climb to avoid one another. The two TCAS systems talk to each other to provide that resolution advisory. It's required with any aircraft over 30 passengers. Or any turbine with takeoff weight greater than 3,300 pounds. So it can be deferred and there is no limitation. It's just super nice to have, as you can imagine. Just flying out to San Francisco this last weekend was pretty crazy because I saw this airplane on TCAS and I could see that it was 1,000 feet lower, 1,000 feet lower than us, but it was coming head on. And I watched this airplane fly directly under us, and you could see the pilots inside the cockpit. It's pretty intimidating, but it's kind of neat to watch the TCAS as you're flying along and see where the other aircraft are, and then you try to spot them outside the airplane. I think that's it. But yeah, there you go. There's your actual ground-based navigations. Now you guys can put together the two pieces of what we're talking about when we're looking at these en route charts and what the actual differences are between the different stations that you see on those charts. Any questions about that?
Is there going to be a lot of this information that is on the tests or exams?
Any of the information on the exams, I specifically pointed out during the PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Again, a lot of this stuff is just kind of like informational. It's not necessarily required test on knowledge. So I try to identify the things that you are actually required to know. But sometimes I just talk too much. Okay, so I left that PowerPoint on the Google Drive for you guys. You can go back, refer to it as many times as you would like to. Okay, let's talk about this reading that I want you guys to go through tonight. or tomorrow or whenever you have the free time over the next couple days. This is just going to help. This is referring to a lot of the stuff that we've talked about so far. Or different definitions of these charts that we've been looking at. The only important stuff that you need to really pay attention to, again, you're not going to be tested on this stuff, but it's important that you guys read this and get an understanding of these charts. The more you know about these charts, the easier your life is going to be down the road. So read this. It looks intimidating. It really isn't, though. Just go through the highlighted information and make sure that you have a basic understanding. That's all we really want you to do with this information. Just make sure that you go through it. Accelerate stop distance, for example, is the length of takeoff run available plus the length of the stopway provided, things like that. Just good overall definitions, and this is something that we want you, as we go through flight planning and things like that, we want you to refer back to. I know somebody asked for, a reference yesterday. This is something in addition to the stuff I've already provided for you to reference and help you decode some of the gibberish that we talk about. But yeah, just go through this document. It's pretty much a dictionary of aeronautical terms that we use. But just get familiar with the highlighted subjects. So just do that over the next day or two this weekend. And then just use this in companion with whenever we talk about navigation. One last thing to talk about before we shut it off for tonight is the quiz. Now, we're supposed to be testing you guys weekly on information that we've gone over. Kind of my bad on the FARs. The FAR test, we will do a review tomorrow before we get started on the rest of our navigation stuff, and then we'll take the test on Friday, the quiz on Friday about the FAR information. When we do these reviews will go over very specifically the information you guys need to know. Use the review and your notes to study for the quiz. That being said, these quizzes will also translate into your practical. When we tell you to study for your practical exam, refer to the quizzes. These quizzes are very selected, tested, tried and true questions that we have learned over the last 6 or 7 years of teaching this course, and have been tailored to helping you guys prepare for the practical test and for interviews in the future. These questions are very specific to interviews at basically every airline you could ever apply for. So, as well as the practical test. Just very basic dispatch knowledge. So please study them thoroughly. And please study the review notes that you take thoroughly to prepare for these quizzes. We'll talk a little bit more about the actual quiz tomorrow as we go through the review, but we'll do one of these tests every week. Next week, we'll do the navigation section. Week after that, so on. We'll cover all of the previous week's information that we've gone over. So, and the pattern will be virtually the same on every test. So, any questions? Anything that we're missing? Comments? If not, we can go ahead and call it a night. I will give you a little bit of time to start rummaging through that reading, or catch up on some Z's, either way. But everybody have a good night, and we will see you guys tomorrow.
Thanks, Garrett.
Yep.
Good night. Thank you.